In today's video, I have a full edit Capture One tutorial where we're not going to get into Photoshop. It's all about Capture One and how I would approach using Capture One for a retouch. Throughout this tutorial, I'm going to show you my portrait workflow techniques using Capture One, and we're going to look at features such as the color editor, how to do dodge in Capture One, using features like Luma Range to specifically make a three-dimensional pop, how do we color grade the image, and using masks to be more specific for color grading. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe because I have a lot of helpful content like editing tutorials in Photoshop, Lightroom, and Capture One. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram because that's where I post all my behind the scenes content. And now let's get started and let's cover todo el pedo. Before we start, let's take a look at the before and after. So I'm going to go to the before and after button up here. So this is the before. And these are all the adjustments. We're going to add things like levels, dodge and burn, and get into some of the color grading. And let's do the split view slider. And keep in mind, I'm using the newest version of Capture One. So some of the features, if you already have Capture One, and if you don't have the newest version, some of these settings you're not going to see. So I already cloned this picture. So clone variant basically means I'm going to make a duplicate, and here it is. So let's go ahead and get started in this image. Now I do have a custom tab set up. I don't like jumping around into all these different tabs. So if you want to set it up just like I do here, where everything's all in one section, all you got to do is right click and then go to add tool tab, and you're going to put custom tab. And then I have this little cute little heart icon. And now I can just add tools, anything that I want to show up over here. So keep in mind that I've customized my interface. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add, let me reset this. There we go. I'm going to add extra film, extra shadow. And I like to use this because I feel like it brings out the detail just a little bit more, little bit better, especially since I shoot high-speed sync. Sometimes the background gets a little bit too dark, so it brings out the detail just a little bit. And then we're going to add a little bit of grain to the image. So that's kind of like my kind of starting point there. The next thing I want to address is I want to get rid of this grass on the leg, just a little bit of it. We're going to get rid of some of the blemishes on the face, and then we're going to get rid of this softbox. And so in order to do that, there's two ways that I can do it. I can hold this plus right here, and I'm going to go to new healing layer. So I have the healing tool. You can push Q on the keyboard to get to it, or you can click this little icon. And what I'm going to do, it works very, very similar to Photoshop. All I'm going to do is I'm going to push the left and right brackets on the keyboard to make the brush bigger or smaller. I'm going to select around the softbox. And then, of course, kind of like Lightroom, it's going to choose pixels to replace that specific area. So it's already removed the softbox, so we got that out of the way. I'm going to push Z on the keyboard to get the zoom tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on the grass that's covering up the leg. So pushing Q again to go back to the healing brush. And one of the things that I've noticed when I'm using this tool, and it kind of works like Photoshop, is you want to do one little section at a time. If you grab too much, it tends to not do a good job. So definitely take your time with this. Get one little section, and you might need to move the little circle here because sometimes it doesn't sample from the best area, and so that it can blend a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and remove parts of the grass, and then we'll get into the face where we'll remove some of the blemishes. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is when I'm using the healing tool, it's a good idea to make a separate layer. So I already did one with the leg getting the grass. Now I'm going to kind of try my best to get this piece of grass. So I'm going to make another healing layer so that it doesn't get confusing with so many circles. So I'm going to come here to the plus, and I'm going to go new healing layer. So I have a second one now. And I'm just going to remove just a little bit of this grass from the shirt. All right, now that I've removed the grass, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to the face, and we're just going to remove a little bit of the blemishes that are on the face here. So I'm going to push Q again, and zooming in is going to help out. And you want to make sure that the brush is about relatively the same size as the blemish. And that pretty much covers the healing brush. Now we're gonna get into some of the exposure. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far, and I wanna talk about today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creative people on topics including photography, productivity, business, and more. Make great use of your downtime and check out Skillshare's online classes, which include a combination of video lessons and class projects. They have a wide range of categories from photography, film and video, and graphic design. One of my favorite classes on Skillshare is Portrait Photography Working with Natural Light by Benjamin Heath. One of my favorite things about this specific class is that it's under an hour, so I literally sat through the entire course, and I like it because it's very similar to the video you're just watching. Benjamin shows you his process from beginning to end on how he sets up the shoots, his planning, and the actual shooting aspect, of course. But then at the very end, he goes in Lightroom and he shows you some of his editing concepts. At the end of the class, Benjamin gives an assignment based off of everything he's taught in the class. And it's cool that you can look at other people that have seen this course and see some of the work that they've created after watching the portrait photography working with natural light. Skillshare offers the perfect opportunity to start learning new skills. For everything Skillshare offers, it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. For the exposure, I'm gonna add a new filled layer. And the reason why I want a new filled layer is I want us to do this to the entire image. I'm gonna rename this by double clicking over here, and we're gonna go HDR. And I'm gonna come down into my high dynamic range slider. I'm gonna bring down my highlights to about -88, 89, that looks fine. You'll see that she's underexposed just a little bit. So what I wanna do is I want to bring up the blacks. So I wanna bring back some of this detail over here. So I'm gonna go about 18. Now I can go up as high as I want, but I think on this one, I'm gonna go about 18. And then I'm gonna go shadows 9. So just looking at that, it brought back, especially all this detail, we got some of this nice detail back into the sky over here. And then brought up some of these shadows. So let's just check that once again, before and then the after. Now, you'll also notice that what I don't like is that I had my light camera left. So I'm gonna zoom in. And I wanted the face to be a little bit brighter. It's not as bright as I would want it to be. So I'm gonna add another layer, but this time I'm gonna go new empty layer. So meaning the adjustments I'm about to make are not gonna be applied anywhere unless specifically I brush in that area. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get the brush tool. And I wanna brighten up the face. So I'm gonna brush here. Now you don't see anything, so I'm gonna push M on the keyboard. M is gonna show me the mask on where I'm brushing. And I also need to fix my flow. So I'm gonna right click. My flow is at 1%, so that's why you didn't see anything. So I'm gonna bring it all the way to 100. So this is very similar to Photoshop. I'm gonna brush it one more time now. And you'll notice that what's in red is where the adjustments are gonna be. So I'm gonna push M again on the keyboard to remove that. So because I did the empty layer and I brushed it, now I can target the face. So I'm gonna name this exposure and then face. And what I wanna do is I want to go into my curves. Now you can do this with levels, exposure, it's really up to you. But what I wanna do is I wanna bring up the exposure just on the face. So you'll see that that adjustment is only being applied there, okay? So I'm gonna just bring it up where I feel it looks good. So I think right about there looks fine. But one of the issues when I'm doing it like that is if I push M on the keyboard, I'm brushing over shadows, midtones, and then highlights. I wanna specifically target just the midtones and the highlights. I don't want it to brighten up the shadows. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do something called Luma Range, which is very similar to Blend If in Photoshop. So I'm gonna push M to get that off. We're gonna go Luma Range. And what I wanna do is I just told you that I wanted to remove it from my shadows and my blacks. So I'm gonna turn on the display mask. And you'll notice that when I drag this in, it starts being sucked away from the shadowed areas, and I'm getting slightly into my midtones. So right about here looks fine. So if I take this off, now I've controlled it to only be in specific parts of the face. So I'm going to hit apply. And now when I go back to exposure face, I can see the before and then the after. Now, I did bring up my curves a little bit too much, so I'm going to kind of get it at a better angle now here on my curves, because I just want it to be a subtle effect. So just right there, you'll see that it popped and it looks a little bit natural there. So I'm going to bring it right about here, and I think that looks good. One of the best things about Capture One is the color option. So now let's focus on the color and bring out all that detail. So I'm gonna hold the plus here. We want a new fill there because we want it to control over the entire image. And I'm gonna name this WB for white balance plus color. All right, hit enter on the keyboard. The first thing I wanna do is I wanna do the color variability. So I'm gonna come up here to white balance, and then also my saturation. So what I want to do is I want to crank up my saturation all the way up. And what I want to do is I want to be able to separate these colors. So bringing up the saturation really shows me where all of my kind of like my strong colors are at. And I can kind of separate these by adjusting the white balance. So I'm going to drag this to the left until I find like a rough estimate on where I like where the colors are separated. So if I hit this check mark, you'll notice that before the white balance, everything kind of looked kind of flat. Everything kind of looked almost in the kind of warmer side. And then after doing this, notice how the blues separate so much from the greens here. The oranges kind of separate. And so before and then the after. Now it's not perfect by all means. So right now, I bring up my saturation and I move my white balance until I get to the point where things look separated. And then I have to come back into the saturation. And then I have to adjust the saturation accordingly. So I'm going to bring mine to about 45. Now this technique is something that I don't use on every image, but I felt like it worked great on this specific image because I really wanted things to be separated. And I learned this technique from Danny Batista, Sue Hell Photos, and Stills in Color. So if you guys are on Instagram, give them a follow. Those guys are super amazing editors, super amazing photographers. So give them a follow. So now that I've done my white balance, let's look at the before and after one more time. I hope you guys are noticing on your end that the colors are separated nice. And now I want to focus on the color editor. So now that I've separated things, now I can select my greens and make adjustments. I'm going to select my oranges to make those pop, and I'm going to select the blues as well. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go into my color editor and I want to go into the advanced. And this is one of the unique features of Capture One. So I'm going to go here to pick color correction. And I specifically want to target the greens. So when I click the greens, now I have those selected and I can click right here where it says view selected color range. And I can kind of see, did I select the specific greens that I wanted? And absolutely, it's showing me in color here. Perfect. All right, so now I have the hue, saturation, and lightness, kind of like you would in other raw editors. I can kind of adjust that specific hue that I have selected there. So what I can do is I can change the hue. I can drag it to the left if I want it to look more golden, or I can drag it to the right if I want it to be more kind of blue-green. It's really going to be up to you guys. But for my specific taste, I want it to kind of tone them down just a little bit. So I want to bring them a little bit more towards the golden side. So about -7 looks good to me. And then I want to reduce the saturation so that those greens aren't as strong and they don't come out and pop out as much. So, but it's going to be up to you guys. Sometimes I look at the image and I'm like, man, you know, the greens actually looks pretty good the way it is. And then other times I'm kind of like, So like right now I'm kind of second guessing myself. I'm actually going to bring back the hue actually. I think I did like the original kind of color. And I'm actually going to bring it back to like -5.5. So I'm going to hit the check mark once again. And I think that looks fine. I kind of neutralized it, but it still has that nice green tone to it. I'm going to go ahead and click this pick color correction again. And this time I'm going to select this orange. Okay. I'm going to go view selected color range. And you'll notice that it's also selecting her face, right? So if I make some adjustments here, it's going to make adjustments to the face, which I don't want. I really want to just target the oranges and the shirt here. So what I want to do is I have to come into this little kind of color wheel here. And I need to start narrowing down my selection. So if I go view selected color range, I can narrow this down and remove the specific orange that I had in the face. So now I only have the shirt and I only have the fruit here selected, which is awesome. I'm gonna drag this down just a little bit more. So perfect. So now that I have that selection, I'm gonna go to view selected color range. And what I wanna do is I wanna make those colors a little bit more saturated. So I'm gonna go saturation and I'm gonna bring it up. And you'll notice that when I bring up the saturation, it's only doing it to those specific areas, but I don't wanna get too cute. Let's go about maybe -9 or negative. Let's go about 9.8. And if I hit the check mark there, just brought out those colors just ever so slightly. So we got that. And then let's choose the color picker again. And then I'm gonna get the blues over here. And let's just verify that I got the blues, and I sure did. We're gonna go to -4.4. So I wanna go more in the teals. The saturation, I'm gonna bring down just a little bit. And then the lightness, I'm gonna darken it up a little bit. Now what's cool about this is when you're in the color editor on the advanced is that you can add, I think, up to like 20 or 15 different kind of color swatches there. So you can just keep selecting colors, boom, boom, boom. They're on their own little layers here, and I can just manipulate those individually, so it's super cool. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. And I'm curious, what is your favorite feature in Capture One 20? Let me know in the comments. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we've done so far with the white balance and the color. So before and after, and let's take a look at the before and after the entire image. So let me go into full view, there we go. So before and the after. So it's looking good so far. We still have to make a few adjustments. And the next one we're gonna focus in on is the lights. And we want to brighten up the light areas. So I still feel like I still wanna brighten up some of these specific areas and the overall tone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to new field adjustment. And I'm gonna name this Curves Luma. Let me fix this real quick. There we go, Curves Luma. And what I wanna do now is this time though, I'm gonna go into the curve and I'm gonna go into Luma and I'm gonna bring this up right about there, okay? Now when I do this, once again, it's adding it to the overall image, and I wanna go into Luma Range and tell Capture One that I don't want it to be, I don't want to raise up my dark, so I'm going to bring it about 74. So it's only going to brighten up these areas and it's going to leave these areas still dark. So the areas in red are what's being brightened up. So I'm going to take that off and then hit that. So if I hit the check mark, so before and then the after, there we go. So we're adding that nice glow, the nice light where we want. And we keeping these areas down here dark because we don't want our eyes to necessarily go down there. I'm gonna add another color grading layer. So I'm gonna go new field layer. And on this one, we're gonna just focus on color balance. Now I probably could do this color balance on this same white balance and color layer, but I like to separate them because it gives me the flexibility of maybe adjusting the opacity because it's separated. So that's just kind of my thought process. So if you're looking at it like, man, you're adding a lot of layers, you could just do it on that same layer. I know that, but I would rather give myself the flexibility of adjusting the opacity after the fact. So I'm gonna come in here and we're gonna go into color balance. So I'm gonna focus on my shadows, my midtones, and my highlights. And I love that this color wheel is kind of built in here. And what I want to do is I want to focus on my shadows first. So I think on this one, what I want to do is I actually want to add just a little bit of magenta. So I kind of want to, I'm getting inspired by this color here on these little plants here. And so I can kind of move this color wheel and kind of figure out where I want to go with this. But I found that the magentas really worked for me. Now I don't want to add too much. Once I drag it towards this color, I can raise up the saturation on however much I want. And then I can also, in the shadows, I can darken up the shadows ever so slightly if I wanted to. So I think I'll do that. I'm going to darken them up just a little bit. I'm going to raise up the saturation right about there. Then I'm going to go into the midtones, and I want to color grade the midtones, and I want to definitely add some nice oranges to my midtones, because I want to have this kind of summer vibe. So I think oranges fits really well. Plus, the whole theme of the shoot was orange, so I'm definitely going to add some nice oranges there. And then same thing with the highlights, but this time on the highlights, we're going to go a little bit more right in between the yellow and the orange. So we're going to go right about there. Actually, I'm sorry. We're going to go opposite. Let's go opposite. Let's go teal. We're going to go a little bit of teal. So we're going to go opposite of orange on the color wheel, the complementary color. And let's kind of go into the blue side, yellow and orange. So we're going to kind of go a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of teal. Then on the master, this is the one that we're going to kind of do the overall color grade on. That's the one that we're going to do a little bit of that kind of light orange kind of vibe to the overall image. So there we go. So let's take a look at what I've done so far. So this is the before and then the after. It's just a subtle effect, but it's adding that nice kind of like overall tone for the image. The next thing that I want to do is I want to work on the eyes and do a little bit of dodge to the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the eyes first. So I'm going to go new filled layer. I'm going to rename this to eyes. And I'm going to go into the curve and I'm going to drag it all the way up, because this is how I want my curve. So when I'm brushing in the eyes here, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to clear that mask. So that effect on that curve is still intact, but now I need a brush where exactly I want to see that. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to get the brush tool by pushing B. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make sure that my flow is about maybe 7 or 8, and then opacity 75. And then I use the pen pressure here. I'm going to go ahead and brighten up just a little bit of that catch light and around the eye. And I just want a little bit of brightness. I don't want to do it too much, but I definitely want to enhance that catch light. And I also want to enhance some of the areas that have those kind of specular highlights around the eye. So I'm just going to kind of make them just a little bit brighter, even here on the lips as well. So if I go back and if I hit the eye, this is the before and then the after, before and then the after. Now I feel like it's a little too much, and that's okay. That's why I have this opacity slider. That's why I like to do things in separate layers. I feel like it's a little bit overkill there. So I'm going to go about 60. And now that looks a little bit natural. Let me zoom in so you guys can see this a lot better. There you go. Now let's take a look at it. So this is just a little bit of a subtle pop effect right there. We're going to go ahead and apply the same technique, but this time we're going to do dodge to lighten out some of the tonal inconsistencies in the face. So I'm going to come back to my layers. I'm going to go new filled adjustment layer. I'm going to name this dodge, because dodge is going to lighten. And we're going to go into the curves and we're going to drag it straight up right about in between these two little squares here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to put clear mask, so we don't see that effect, because I just want to brush specifically where I want to see that effect. So I'm going to get the brush tool. So I'm going to push B on the keyboard, right click, and these are the settings that I'm going to use: opacity 75%, flow 3%. And then because I'm using a tablet, I'm going to make sure that that's check marked there, use pen pressure. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to get some of the obvious areas and just try to even out some of these parts that are brightened that I want to fix. So I'm going to just brush a little bit more, and then I'm going to push M on the keyboard so you can see exactly where I'm brushing. So if I push M, you'll see that that's exactly where I've been brushing. So that's all I'm going to do in this next step. I'm not going to spend too much time like I typically would in Photoshop, but I definitely want to show you what the end results look like. So let's take a look at the before and after. So if I push M on the keyboard, that'll show you where I dodged. Like I said, I did a quick version of dodge here in Capture One. I can just hit the check mark here as well, just to show you the before and after. I'm also gonna add some brightness into the hair now. So now I'm on to the last two steps. And last night when I was looking at this image, I looked at the sky color and I was like, man, how can I get the tones to be a little bit more vibrant and still look nice and natural? So what I ended up doing is I added a new field adjustment layer. And this time I'm just going to name it Sky. And what I went into was I went into my levels and I started going into my blues. And if I drag my highlights, which is these bright areas here, of course, and I drag it to the left, you'll notice that those blues become a little bit more vibrant. If I go to the greens, those greens will add that kind of like nice kind of teal look to it. And then in my reds, I'm going to add in my midtones, drag it to the right so that I add a little bit more cyan into those midtones. Now, one of the issues that happens is now, well, this kind of color grade that I did does it to the overall image. We know that we don't want it on the face. We don't want it on the grass. Unless that's something that you kind of want to go for, that's totally, totally fine. But what I want to do is I want to go into Luma Range as a starting point. We're not going to use this for the entire thing, but I want to remove it for sure from the shadows. I want it to kind of speed up. I'm using Luma Range to speed up where exactly I don't want it. So obviously I don't want those kind of blue tones to come down here. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to hit apply. So now what I want to do is I want to push M on the keyboard. And we know that we don't want it on the face and on this grass. So what I want to do is now I'm going to push E on the keyboard to get the eraser. And I'm just going to simply erase it where I don't want that effect to be applied. So the blue kind of overall tone in the sky, we know that we don't want it, especially on the face. So I'm going to make sure my brush is about the same size. And we're going to go in here. We're going to erase it. So wherever you see in red is where that color grade is being adjusted. I'm going to push M to take that off. And let's take a look at it now. So we hit the before and then the after. We add those nice blue tones. And because I made it its own layer, if I feel like I went too far, I can always tone this down and pull it back. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do is I love always just double checking. So I'm going to add a new field there. And I'm going to go to levels. I like to just make sure that my overall exposure looks good. I still feel like she can pop a little bit. So looking at my histogram, I'm just going to bring my highlight slider over to the left ever so slightly. Now let's take a look at the before and after. And just to recap what we did the color grading, we did the dodge, and then we used Luma Range to our advantage to get this final image. So before and then the after. And that concludes the tutorial. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.